Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Talk about the young and the old and everybody else in between today. So if you're human, you should have an interest in some of the conversations that are set to unfold. If you're not human, well, you know, stick around, you never know. I'm drawn to the two ends of the Tory manifesto, the removal of the winter fuel allowance, which was a fascinating policy when it was first introduced. A friend of mine's grandfather sent a personal cheque to Gordon Brown for £200 on the grounds that he didn't need it. He thought it was absolutely outrageous that he was being given money, and yet he voted for Tony Blair in 1997, having voted Tory all his life, because he was so outraged by the thought of gentlemen and ladies of his generation being unable to pay their fuel bills. I don't know whether it's good or bad, this proposal. I want you to tell me. The Daily Mirror estimates that 10 million pensioners could lose it, so only the 2 million currently in receipt of pension credit would retain the winter fuel allowance. And then we sort of press fast forward and get to school meals, which we'll also discuss, because I don't have a problem with the idea of my girls not getting free lunches anymore. I was always slightly troubled by the thought that they did. That's, however, because I believe that there is genuine poverty and problem in the country, and that if the money is to be directed at the areas of genuine need, then my daughters and free lunches would not even be on the top million priorities. So we'll get stuck into both of those. And then something a little odd happened in the news today, because Mrs. O'Brien and I were discussing last night the prospect of getting a smartphone for our eldest, and taken some advice from some very qualified friends that we should get her one, which slightly surprised me. And then I turned on the news this morning, I opened up the newspapers this morning to discover that the sort of websites that young children routinely access via smartphones could be causing them all manner of harm and problems. So we'll get stuck on that. And I know what you're thinking. If you're kind enough to listen to the programme on a regular basis, you've just got smartphones. I remember when you tore that dad to shreds because he bought his daughter a normal phone that didn't even have internet access on it, and you were telling him that he was... yeah, all right, I was wrong about that as well. Wrong about a lot of things, but usually involving the things you learn as you get older rather than the actual politics. But we'll get onto that later in the programme. Which way round do you want to do it? Should we start with the winter fuel allowances and then move on to school dinners? Ideally, we can knit the two together. I don't want you to feel that you're excluded from either conversation. I got a few messages yesterday, not for the first time, an indication of just, what's the right word I'm looking for? Just what quality, the calibre of listeners that we're proud to have on this programme. Because when we were talking yesterday about manifestos and policies, I got about half a dozen people reminding me of something I hadn't really read up on since university, something called the Veil of Ignorance by an American philosopher called John Rawls. And the theory is, I mean, he did it as a theory of justice, not as an actual political system, but it stands. You can extend it. The idea is that the fairest available society that democracy can provide would be one in which we cast our votes without knowing where we sat in society. Do you see what I mean? So if you were unaware to think of the big story yesterday about dementia care and that phrase that we predicted would happen. Do you remember? I think it was Caroline who called in and said it's a dementia tax. That's now in the headlines today. That's going to haunt Theresa May, I suspect, that phrase, dementia tax. But if we didn't know what the numbers were or the likelihood of us getting it, which is quite low, if you were asked, should dementia care, should social care, should old age care be married to the NHS? Should it be something that our national insurance and tax contributions pay for later in life? Or should it be something that only the people affected pay for themselves? Well, you could break it down, not completely, but if you knew you were affected by it, you'd vote to have everybody pay for it. And if you thought you weren't going to be affected by it, you'd vote to have just the people affected by it pay for it. So the veil of ignorance means you don't know whether you're going to get it, whether anyone's going to, you just don't know. So I think if we all pulled on a veil of ignorance, we'd reject the dementia tax on the grounds that the burden should be shared by all of us. The burden of being unlucky in that particular medical context, the burden of being unlucky should be spread over the whole of society in the way that it is for cancer. The school dinners, yeah, let's do them both together, actually. You can ring in on either of these. You don't have to do the show on tracks or on rails. Because the school dinners argument, I think, goes the other way. If I put on my veil of ignorance, if I didn't know how much money I had, okay, in society, and you say, because that's the other thing, of course, about the social care veil of ignorance, is you wouldn't know whether you had a massive fortune or whether you had £100,000 left over. Do you see what I mean? But if I didn't know how much money I had, if I could wear a veil of ignorance, then I still would not vote for everyone to have free school lunches. I never really got that policy. I know it was one of Nick Clegg's shiniest, but it never quite made sense to me. There are kids at my girls' school who would be on free school meals and will continue to be on free school meals after my girls cease to get free school meals. So I don't know quite what's wrong with that. It saves money, obviously, which makes you wonder whether that's the only reason that they've done it. But equally, they're going to give free breakfast to children. And this is, I think, something that we probably underestimate the necessity of. It's not just poverty that sees parents send their children to school unfed. I'd love you to call me if you're a primary school teacher. 0345 6060 973. Talk to me if you would about what children turn up to school, what sort of condition children are turning up to school in, and we'll work out why breakfast is probably a desperately important delivery for the government to provide. And then we'll look at the question of whether or not anybody ever liked the idea of everybody getting free lunch. I've just got some breaking news for you. The rape investigation in Sweden into the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is to be discontinued, we've just heard. So Sweden's rape investigation against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is to be discontinued. We'll get more on this as the story develops, but at first glance, I would suggest cautiously to you that might mean he'll be on his way out of the Ecuadorian embassy. We'll find out later this morning, no doubt, about that. But where are we going to start on this? Let's start with both stories and with the simple question, what do you think of it? Let's presume that the Mirror's numbers are close to correct. That means unless you're on pension tax credits, and you'll know whether you are, won't you? Unless you're on pension tax credits, you could be about to lose your winter fuel payment. How do you greet that news? 0345 6060 973. You remember there was a lot of fuss and kerfuffle at the time from wealthy people, wealthy pensioners saying they didn't want the money, they were going to send it back, they were going to surrender it. Only about 400 people, according to the only figures I've been able to find, have done that on an annual basis. Only about 400 people have surrendered money. Very strangely, it's the only example I can remember doing this job of when I've said, here's some money, do you want it? And a significant number of people rang in to say, no, I don't. It's a bit like that old canard about, no, you say, who wants to pay more tax? No one's actually going to put their hands up. But actually some people will, quite a lot of people told us last week that if they could see absolute evidence that a penny on the pound in income tax would directly go towards the NHS, then they would put their hand up to pay a penny more in income tax. So these are sort of slightly cliched, slightly hackneyed generalisations that don't hold true. Would you put your hand up to pay more tax? Well, yes, I would in certain circumstances. And similarly, on the winter fuel payment, do you think you should have money given to you? Quite a lot of people said no. So we'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, if we can't knit them together, then we'll do them in the traditional fashion and do them separately in separate hours. But at the moment, I'd like you to ring me on either. So what do you think about losing winter fuel allowance for pensioners? It was one of the starkest lessons I learned when I started doing this job, the idea that people genuinely couldn't afford to heat their home. Unfortunately, the right-wing position traditionally was to deny that poverty existed unless they were talking about foreign aid. Poverty existed in Britain only in the context of why we shouldn't be paying foreign aid. As soon as you said poverty existed in Britain without mentioning foreign aid, the traditional right-wing position is to deny that poverty exists. Of course, there's no such thing as poverty. Ethiopia or something is the traditional response. But then you throw foreign aid into the mix as well, and suddenly there is widespread poverty in this country, and everybody using a food bank is a victim of circumstance and somehow being robbed from by the foreign aid budget. So we can hopefully be a little bit cleverer than that. I'm a little uncomfortable with the winter fuel allowance being taken away. I've got to be honest with you. I like universal rights. I like universal benefits. And the price you pay for a universal benefit in order to ensure that everybody who needs it gets it, the price you pay for that, the risk you take, is seeing some people who don't need it also get it. I'd rather people who don't need it get it than people who do need it don't get it. What do you think? 03456060973. Conversely, on the school dinners thing, I don't think that you need to give it to people that don't need it in order to ensure that people who do need it still get it. I could be wrong. I could be completely contradicting myself. I could be sounding like the mother of all hypocrites. And I don't know what it would be like to be on free school dinners. I know they tell me they've found ways of reducing the stigma. You don't have to queue separately anymore or have a badge stamped to your forehead. But again, the other kids will find out, won't they? Oh, I'm not going to start talking myself out of this before it's even 10:15. Because if the other kids find out you're on, you know what kids can be like. The other kids find out you're Jimmy Free dinners. You're never going to escape that stigma. I don't know. You tell me. You're closer to the coalface on this one. And if you're a teacher, if you're in a primary school, would you mind just talking to the rest of us about children turning up at school in a state of relative malnourishment? A friend of mine's mum worked in a primary school in quite a rough part of Manchester, one of the overspill estates in Manchester, and she was in charge of the school budget and realised quite quickly that they were going to have to do two things. Number one, start what they called a breakfast club, because so many people turning up for school were literally starving. They were proper hungry. And number two, she spent school budget money on teaching parents how to cook. And she would say, and some of my more leftish friends might not like this, but she worked in the primary school. She would say that actually it wasn't necessarily poverty that saw these children arrive at school. It was often bad parenting. So there would be working parents who were too frazzled or too sort of lazy in the mornings to give the kids a proper breakfast, or there were parents who should have been spending money on breakfast for their children, but instead spent it on the proverbial fags and booze. These people do exist. I think idealists like me sometimes like to squint a little, close our eyes and pretend that they don't exist, but they're not the reason why the problems persist, but they are part of the problems. So, old people losing money, children losing free lunches. It doesn't exactly look like a lurch to the left when you view it in those terms, does it? We're taking money away from old age pensioners and food away from children. But some people are concerned that Theresa May is lurching too far to the left. We'll unpick all of this now. It's 10:15. And they're laughing at me for being old again. I'm in Steve Allen's studio today, not in my normal studio. I'm struggling with the computers, and they're laughing at me for being old. Actually, glancing at my screen, we've got the full range coming up next. First caller's 22. Caller after that, I think, is in his 80s. Let's start in Newcastle. That's where Kaylee is. What made you pick up the phone, Kaylee? What would you like to say?
Hey, James.
Hello, mate.
I had to call because being a younger person and just hearing everyone talk about older people who, I don't know, I just feel like they're put on a pedestal quite a lot in, like, political policy.
Well, not anymore. I mean, this is, I mean, genuinely, for the first time since you've been allowed to vote, you have the party that is ahead in the polls pledging to take money away from pensioners. And it's the Conservative Party, somewhat surprisingly.
Yeah, it's very true. But the discussion that we're having and people saying that it's unfair, I just think you need to take a step back for a minute and just think why, just because you're over a certain age, you should get the entitlement to have free things. Because even if it was a single mum, they'd be the first people to say, well, she's a single mum on benefits, why is she getting free money? Why is that asylum seeker getting free money?
Or working parents. I mean, it doesn't have to be the sort of tabloid, the demonised tabloid targets, does it? So, I mean, all benefits payments are free. So, free money in the sense that you described them. So, the winter fuel allowance is designed to address the fact that, well, just partly to state the bleeding obvious, but some people miss the bleeding obvious on issues like this. If you're a pensioner, you're at home more often, so you need to heat more than you do if you're going out to work. So there's some logic behind it, but you find the idea of somebody with £20 million in the bank getting 300 quid a year or whatever it is now, winter fuel allowance, absurd.
I do. I find it hard to comprehend and, like, understand. Just, yeah.
How would you decide who gets it then?
I think the people who are on the state pension even exist anymore. I don't know. I'm not going to get a state pension. So do people still get that?
Well, you will go. I know. Don't give up yet at 22. You might be 104 before you actually get it if they carry on moving the goalposts as they have for the so-called WASPy women, who I think are one of the most shamefully ignored constituencies in politics. But so you would say if all you get is the state pension, if you don't have it topped up in any way with a private pension, you should get the winter fuel allowance still?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's still going to see it taken away from millions, and yeah, it's the closest they can probably come. How easy is means testing? I don't know, actually. You presume it's easy, but I'm pretty sure when they took away our child benefit, you had to tell them that you were above the threshold for child benefit, rather than wait for them to just sort of somehow pull the plug. And if you didn't tell them and you were still getting it, then you were liable to some form of prosecution. Kaylee, thank you. Let's I hope you don't mind me introducing you in this fashion, Roy, but I'm going to say let's go to the other end of the generational scale.
Yeah, 79, coming on 80 sort of thing, you know.
Nearly there.
Yeah, what amazed me is, years ago, when they brought in this heating allowance, right, my daughter phoned me up and said, Dad, you can get the heating allowance and the free bus pass. I said, well, I'm still working, I'm just over 60. But they was giving it to people over 60, even though they wasn't drawing a state pension. And that puzzled me, and I think it boiled down to the women used to retire at 60, so they got the free bus pass and the...
And then they extended it to men as well, even though they weren't necessarily retired. I'll take your word for that. I'm not clear on the finer detail. But
this is what I remember about it. You know,
no, fair enough. But where we are now is that most pensioners are going to lose it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I want to eat my own. I mean, I'm a thrifty person, you know, and it comes in handy for us and all that. And I mean, I still pay for me glasses and the dentist and all that. Don't get anything like that free. I mean, I paid out £224 back last month, or no, last year, for a dentist thing, like, you know. And to take these things away from us...
How much do you get at the moment? I should know this before I come on air, Roy, but I rely on people like you to fill in the gaps.
What do you mean?
How much do you get for the winter fuel allowance? What is it these days?
It's £200 now, but it used to be $250, then they knocked it down to $200.
Okay.
I think if you're a married couple, you get $300.
Oh, okay. So and you're on your own, are you, at the moment?
Yeah, I'm living on my own. Right?
Like I say, at the moment, Roy, because you never know what might be around the corner. You never know who you might meet later today.
Well, a bit late.
It's never too late, mate. Never too late. I was with a gentleman in his mid-80s yesterday, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and I kept telling him that it's, you know, there's a 109-year-old in the Independent who...
What I was saying is about if you get pension credits, you keep it. I thought, well, I'm just above that. I mean... I've got a private pension. I've worked all my life.
Well, you're not getting it now, pal. You're not having it. They're taking it away. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, if they was to turn around and take the free bus pass away, I'd be sort of like stranded because...
They won't do that. Well, I'd say they won't do that. How do you know? Once they start... I was about to say they won't take that away.
Yeah,
but some people will they'll means test your bus pass. That's what scares me. But this is where I sound a bit of a communist, Roy. What worries me is that if you take it away from anybody... if it stops being for everybody, then you just open up the door to people who would really need it not getting it. And I don't know how you guard against that.
Yeah, what I say is you pay for your stamps all year. I started work when I was 15 and blah, blah, this, but then done 2 years in the army, and then settled down, brought up 3 kids. They're all right, you know. And then when it comes to when you want to you retire and you want the little, you know, don't want to worry about money all the time.
Yeah.
And this is what happens, like, you know.
I do, and that's why it's an odd policy in the sense that it simultaneously sees Theresa May being cast today as lurching to the left and somehow returning to the reputation of the nasty party, which of course was the phrase she coined to describe how some people saw the Conservatives back when she was chairman. Roy, thank you, mate. Thanks for filling in some of the gaps in my knowledge as well. I'm going to crack on because the phones have gone a bit mad on this, and I can see why, because it doesn't lend... I keep saying this phrase, post-partisan. We are in sort of uncharted waters politically. The business community is very cross with this Conservative Party manifesto. They see it as an assault upon some of the free market principles that they hold dear. So unconservative in many ways, you could argue, traditionally. But taking away free lunches from school kids, that's back to Margaret Thatcher milk snatcher, Theresa the meal stealer. Mark's in Dartford. Mark, what do you think?
Well, James, first-time caller, so I'm a little bit nervous.
Don't be daft, it's only me.
I've got an opinion on basically both of the subjects.
Yeah, go on.
I think with the school meals, it's not necessarily about the poverty of the recipient. Maybe if we look at it as we're educating the palate of a future nation, maybe with a lower salt, lower sugar diet, which is obviously going to have health benefits and a saving through the NHS.
Otherwise, they might come to school with a packed lunch consisting of turkey Twizzlers and a pint of Sunny Delight.
the old Greg's sausage roll breakfast.
Hey, hang on a minute. You leave Greg's sausage roll breakfast out of this, okay? We'll stay.
I must admit, I had partaken.
Yeah, it's very partial to a Greg's sausage roll, especially when you get 4 for 3. With 4 for the price of 3, and you can share them with the kids on the condition that they never tell their mum what you've given them to eat. But the problem with that, and I sometimes have to put myself in the role of somebody who doesn't. I don't believe this, but I said, but we can't afford to be doing that. We can't afford to be feeding all these children. If their parents aren't up to the task of educating them about nutrition, then that's not my problem.
I think it's a case of spending £1 to save 9 later on.
And that is the problem. That's the problem with a 5-year political cycle and economic policies that are designed mostly to win elections rather than to necessarily improve the health of the nation 25 years hence. So you'd keep them in place. Hang on. The fact that poor kids will still get free school dinners, does that comfort you at all?
Bonus.
Right.
That's a bonus. And moving on to the winter fuel allowance.
Yes.
Now, my dad was a resident caretaker throughout the 70s and early 80s in South East London.
Yeah.
I used to go round with him, and I used to go in the homes of our APs.
Yes.
And I saw some sad sights.
Yeah.
People basically condemned to sit in a chair in front of the proverbial 2-bar fire.
Yeah, with 4 jumpers
now,
and a woolly hat.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now I'm heading towards 50, and as part of my job, a sizable percentage in my customer base are pensioners.
Right.
And not all of them, I don't want to generalise too much, but there is a sizable percentage. They ain't the pensioners that I saw in the 70s and 80s. They do not need the winter fuel allowance.
Well, maybe they do. But they're spending it, which is why they're not in the circumstances that you used to witness 30 years ago.
Well, maybe they need it to transfer into euros for their holiday in Marbella.
Oh, right, OK. So they are generally better off than they were when you sort of framed a belief that this poverty problem among old people was real. I like this. I
it was real.
No, I hear you.
I saw it with my own eyes.
But you don't think it is anymore?
I'm not. I don't want to make a generalisation. There was always going to be someone.
And again, it'll be like school dinners, though. So you're like me. You see it the other way round. You take away one, but not the other. You've got a problem with the school dinners. Oh no, you've got a problem with the school dinners being taken away, but not with the winter fuel allowance being taken away.
Because I can see the benefits. I can see the benefits of both schemes, but they're actually being the first one's being administered in the right way.
Yes.
And really should be every kid of primary school age. Because the science is there. I mean, before I listened to Radio 4.
Yes.
For sorry to say, and there was a guy on there the other week who was the basically leading scientist who's been going on at the food industry for years to get salt cut. Now, salt's been cut by a huge amount in our diet, and we haven't even really noticed it.
They've done it incrementally. They've done the same with some fizzy drinks and sugar as well. They've just chipped away at it. And you're absolutely right, mate. All the research shows that free school meals improve primary school educational attainment. So the actual figures for the whole school go up when everybody gets a free lunch. And that's just in terms of how they're performing at school that day. As you remind us, this could also have a legacy for decades hence in terms of healthy eating and nutrition. Mark, I'm late for the news. Do you know what that means?
What's that?
That means your debut was brilliant, mate.
Oh, well, there you go.
Look at that.
I'll phone you again on some subject.
I look forward to it. It's 10:30. And a couple of questions for you today. One about children having their school dinners taken away, which, as a father of 2 children who currently qualify for free school dinners by dint of being at a state primary school, I began at 10 o'clock saying that's daft that my kids get lunch. I said it when Nick Clegg introduced the policy, but I do wonder now, well, we're pausing for thought, and similarly, I don't think I like the idea of pensioners losing the winter fuel allowance, weirdly, and we're getting the calls. I don't want to preempt anybody, but of course people are pointing out some of the stuff we sometimes forget, like you can carry on claiming it even when you live on the Costa del Sol. But I would remind you that air conditioning can be very expensive, at least as expensive as heating. But that wasn't supposed to be sarcastic, actually, but I suspect it reached your ears quite sarcastically. Oh, yeah, get your violins out. They can't afford to pay for their air conditioning. So we're just doing both, knitting them together, because I see, and it hasn't quite crystallised yet, has it? But I see a sort of similarity here, almost as if they're 2 sides of the same coin. Nick's in Tottenham. Nick, what would you like to say?
It's funny, isn't it, James? Because you and me don't agree normally on politics, and I found out over the last couple of days that you do get a good view of what your friends are really like on Facebook when you post something about the school dinners, which is what I did yesterday. I had to delete a couple of people actually afterwards. So here's my situation. I have voted Conservative in every general election since I'm in my early 40s, right? Now, I don't have a party to vote for now. When I put about the school dinners on Facebook yesterday, every single person on my Facebook, because you do tend to have the sort of same mates politically, and they were, oh, you've got to look at the bigger picture, you know, if you don't vote Tory and Corbyn this and Corbyn. Now, what my situation is, I've got 3 kids under 6. We go to a state school, primary, all of them. It's a faith school.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether you know this, because it's not your faith, it's the Jewish faith. We are constantly asked for various different amounts of money in our faith school every week for either, look, there's a school trip, fine, 40 quid or whatever, but also we're asked for these contributions towards things that the government don't pay for, like the religious part of it, the studies, the books. So, and it can be up to 200, 300 quid a month, right? It's voluntary, so you pay what you can.
Yes.
But, you know, nobody knows what anyone pays, the teachers don't know, so you send an email, you pay a bit, that's fine.
Yeah, we have the same at our school, but not on that scale.
But it all mounts up.
Yes.
It all mounts up, right? And this is for 7 years until they go to secondary school, and then it carries on every year until they leave there at 16. So the only saving grace for me, because, look, I'm not on the poverty line, I've got a very decent job, although my wife's not working because we've got 3 under 6, is that, oh, great, you know, we get these free school dinners until the end of year 2, and that's going to save me 120 quid a month, I think it is. And then all of a sudden the other day I read that even that's going now, and I thought, right, sod that, I'm not going to vote Conservative now. Just on that one base. I know it's a bit selfish. I put it on Facebook, and then I get loads of abuse about, oh, you know,
well, you're not going to get any sympathy for me for getting loads of abuse on social media, mate. I think I say great.
These are my friends and family. I'm not talking about strangers. I'm talking about So the point is that it's going to hit me hard.
And they lean. So your friends lean to the right, then?
Oh, we're all conservative, right wing Zionism. You know, we're all.
So you're all. Well, let's leave Zionism out of it for heaven's sake.
Okay. Which is Jewish school.
No, I know, but Craig, flipping it, mate. I thought free school dinners. This would be one area where it doesn't lead back to the Middle East.
Well, no, I like to bring it to everything, either that or football.
But just hang on. No, I just want to get this absolutely clear. So you are essentially quite right wing and proud of it, until it's you that's on the receiving end of the cuts that you normally like.
Well, listen, I rent as well.
No, just pause a minute. I don't think you let that land with quite the weight that it needs to land. So you're all in favour of austerity and cuts until it's you.
Listen, I'm not that deep into politics. When I say right wing,
here we go. He's backpedaling now.
But can I just make one point?
Of course you can.
The fact of the matter is that one of my Tory mates said to me, "Hold on, Neil, you're gonna save 120 quid a month." Sorry, you're going to save 1,200 quid a year on you know, because they've knocked that off the personal allowance. So what's 120 quid a month?
Yes.
But, you know, I don't know about all this stuff. It doesn't. All I can see is 120 quid more a month of school dinners. That's all I can.
No, I hear it, and you don't understand why you're in the front line for that, and that's interesting. I mean, I don't know how they're going to. I mean, where is the threshold now? It's means tested. You're clearly going to be above that threshold. You're going to lose the school dinners. But I make this point mischievously because we're part as friends. You probably weren't in the front line of objecting to cuts that didn't affect you directly.
Possibly. I just want to know, when is it starting? Have you got any idea when it's starting?
Well, they need to win the election first, mate. So we can't count those chickens necessarily. But no, I don't know when it would start. I think pretty quickly, because I know that when Nick Clegg introduced the free school meals for every child, it was happening within a term or two. So yeah, it will be long before they leave primary school, I think. Well, thank you for the call. We covered a lot of ground. I like it, but I mean, it always makes you sound like a bit of a smug lefty when you point out that your attitude to cuts should be objective, but it can't be. It's always going to be coloured by whether it affects you directly or not, which is why I began with that slightly pretentious reference to John Rawls's veil of ignorance. It was there was Nick absolutely nailing why the veil of ignorance is such a powerful philosophical tool. Let's go to Birmingham. John's there. John, what would you like to say?
Well, I can't believe your disconnect on the importance of free school meals. Being a teacher myself, seeing firsthand just how much of a difference it makes when it's a universal right to a school meal. Yes. It makes such a difference. There's not even a comparison in terms of...
You're a teacher, give me a break. I'm just a dad who says my girls don't need it. It seems silly that poorer people are effectively paying for my children's lunch. That's all. At the coalface, you're now describing to me, you're now telling me that at the coalface it's a lot more complicated than that, and that's why I'm here to, I'm all ears.
We had children that were physically upset because of the stigma attached to when they used to have to have their special passes.
But we can steer that, can't we? We can.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's there's no way that children would be discreet and even consider the other child's feelings when it comes to something.
No, but there's a way.
As soon as you make.
You can disguise the fact. You don't have to know that the kid next to you in the queue is getting it for free. I know that schools used to manage to pull that off. Yeah, I appreciate you're a teacher, so your qualifications are greater than mine on this issue, but I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to have a system that's blind. Everyone has a card, and some parents have to charge it up with money, and others have it charged up by the school. No?
The way the children work, they will tell their best friend, they'll fall out, and then it will always get out eventually.
You'll be Jimmy free dinners for the rest of your life, won't you?
Exactly, and then that would make the people that do get outed, if you will, to be receiving the free school meals even more of a target, because the children that are secretly receiving them as well won't want to stand up for them. They'll actually probably join in the mickey taking. That's kind of how school life is in the playground.
And the fact that they all get a free breakfast is neither here nor there under your analysis of the withdrawal of free lunches, is it?
No, one of the main reasons for me wanting to make sure that this remains in place is that even in the trials that were done quite a few years ago, when they introduced this at selected schools, free school meals for everyone, the progress made by all pupils, the attainment was 2 months in every school year.
Yeah.
Now, why
I've seen the figures, actually. Incorrigible FCA just sent them over.
Why on earth would we want to go back on that? Now,
well, hang on. That's not a rhetorical question. That's not a rhetorical question. We'll talk about behaviour in a minute. We're staying with these two subjects for at least a couple of hours, so don't worry if you're waiting. I'll be with you imminently. But the answer could be, and this is where perhaps the nasty party label comes back into play, why on earth would you do that? Answer, because money is more important than kids' health and kids' education.
And it's also disrupted for even those children that can afford, their parents can afford to pay for the meals. They will be disadvantaged by this as well, because when you do have school meals where people will either send their child in with a packed lunch, that the quality of the food that the majority of parents unfortunately send in to school, it was worse before, it's packed with sugar, it's very unhealthy, which definitely has a direct impact. It's proven scientifically it has a direct impact on attention span and behaviour in the classroom. And if you've got a classroom with children that aren't behaving because they're packed with E-numbers, it affects the whole class. Standards in schools go down, and...
Well, we can all recognise that. I mean, even as adults, you know, you can tell when people are hangry, can't you? And people are harder to cooperate with because they're hungry, or the point that just intrigues me, actually, on a scale of 1 to 10, and this is a utterly amateurish measure, as a teacher, taking away free school meals from everybody, on a scale of 1 to 10, how nasty is it as a policy?
I think it's as nasty as you can get. I voted Conservative in the last election. On this one item alone, there's no way that I could put a tick or a cross in a Conservative box. I think it's utterly disrespectful, counterproductive in terms of what you want to achieve.
Yes.
And I just think it's going to not only create misery for the children, but also a generation. It will affect the outcome of an entire generation. This simple act of universal free meals will affect the outcome of an entire generation.
You're a powerful advocate, but I can't let you go without reminding you that it's only been around for 10 minutes.
But the difference it's made, we're getting so much more progress from the pupils. Look at exam results. Even you know, in the short term that it has been in place, you are seeing that even throughout the SATs, that the results are getting better. Yes, teaching methods are adapting, but when you've got a classroom full of children that are better behaved, more focused, because of the food that they're eating, it makes a huge, huge difference. And why on earth would they? For me,
well, they would argue, presumably, they'd sort of just whistle while you pointed out the cost savings that are part of this proposal, and argue that giving them a free breakfast could have similar outcomes to giving them a free lunch.
James, for me, if I put it into perspective of a similar situation, it's like them saying we can't afford the prisons anymore. It costs too much to keep people in prison. We're going to ban prisons. We're going to, make everything legal.
We'll make a shock jock of you yet, John. When teaching loses its appeal, we'll make a shock jock of you yet. It's a blistering analogy, a blunt analogy, but I don't think I'm in any position to criticise other people for blunt analogies. I'm a little late for the travel. John, great call. 10:46 is the time. That breaking news I brought to you just over half an hour ago is, as I said it would, developing. Sweden's rape investigation against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is to be discontinued, but this, of course, poses many, many more questions than it potentially answers. Richard Suchet has been examining some of them. Where are we, Richard?
Well, it is very interesting. Julian Assange has lived in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012, trying to avoid extradition. He feared being extradited to the US if he was sent to Sweden, and Sweden wanted him on allegations of rape. But
why did America want him?
Well, they wanted him, obviously, in connection with WikiLeaks.
For espionage, effectively.
Exactly,
okay.
Yeah.
Which is a capital offence in America.
Yes. Okay. It's a very serious offence. Sweden's Director of Public Prosecutions has decided to drop the rape investigation, and the European arrest warrant that is out for him will now be revoked, apparently ending this 7-year standoff. And his supporters are celebrating and are excited to see him walk free from the Ecuadorian embassy. But I am not sure that it is as simple as that. Westminster Magistrates Court issued a warrant for the arrest of Julian Assange after he failed to surrender to the court on the 29th of June 2012. So he was in breach of his bail.
Right.
Now, that's an offence. And
this was when people like Jemima Khan had paid tons of money to cover his bail, and then he skipped out on it.
Exactly.
Right.
So, the Metropolitan Police Service says it is obliged to execute that warrant should he leave the embassy. So what they are saying, the Met Police, is that Julian Assange remains wanted, even though it is obviously for a much less serious offence. Now, the other interesting aspect to this is that back in, I think it was almost exactly a month ago, actually, the US Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, said that it was now the top priority of the United States to arrest Julian Assange.
Even though many people think he was instrumental in promoting Donald Trump's interests.
Well, that's a whole other discussion. But the point is that Julian Assange wouldn't be aware if there was an extradition request that had been made by the United States.
So it wouldn't go to his lawyers, because, of course, that would be a flight risk. So he's not going to know whether there's an... So
in the same way you don't tell a drug dealer you're going to arrest him.
So he's sitting in the cupboard at the Ecuadorian embassy, not knowing quite what
my understanding is that there could be an extradition request from the United States to the UK for him, and if there was, we wouldn't know about it. The government wouldn't tell us either way. So it may be that he decides to leave the Ecuadorian embassy and could be arrested immediately.
By whom?
By the Metropolitan Police, because firstly he's in breach of his bail.
And then the extradition request.
And then there could be an extradition
come to their attention.
Right. So
I think I'm more confused. This is the first time this has ever happened, Richard Suchet, with the quality of your reporting. I'm considerably more confused now than I was before you started speaking.
I think it's because I come on the radio and speculate wildly. It doesn't help you in any way.
Welcome to the club.
So,
but this is all legally plausible.
I've spoken to the Home Office this morning, and they say we do not comment and we do not confirm either way whether there is an extradition request from any country. There was a European arrest warrant out based on the allegations he faced in Sweden. That they can tell us about, but they can't tell us about any extradition request. So it may be that there is an extradition request from the United States. They have said that arresting Julian Assange is his top priority. And the Metropolitan Police have confirmed that he is still wanted for breaching his bail. So I am not sure that he can walk free from the Ecuadorian embassy today.
And then just to add a new layer of confusion, Chelsea Manning, of course, was released yesterday.
I know.
Chelsea Manning was the architect of the original WikiLeaks leaks.
The timing is...
Curiouser and curiouser.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to read into that.
When do you think we might learn more? We'll just watch the front door of the Ecuadorian embassy.
He's not one to stay quiet, Julian Assange, so I'm sure we will get something today. but we'll have to see. Our reporter Rachel Venables is heading down there right now. Is probably already there, and she will be keeping an eye on the front door or indeed the balcony.
See, Roger Stone, of course, one of Trump's key advisors, spoke of having a back channel to Assange in Britain, and that adds another layer of complication. If Sessions is publicly expressing a desire to see extradition, why would one of Trump's bagmen have a back channel to Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy?
No, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you have to look at in the space of a month. You have that line about back channels. You have the release of Chelsea Manning. You have the message from the United States that arresting him is a top priority.
Yes.
You have the dropping of the allegations or the investigation in Sweden. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes,
of
but
course,
there is movement suddenly.
There was the visit to the Ecuadorian embassy made by Nigel Farage, which, when he was asked about in a German newspaper a couple of days ago, he hot-footed it from the interview, which is, I think, something that's only ever happened once before. Julian Assange, Russian money, all sorts of difficult questions. You can read that English translation of the interview in Die Zeit, Z-E-I-T, if you follow my Twitter feed. Am I going to see you again today, do you think? Or is this going to, I mean, you're going to come piling in at half
Well, I'm
past
free
11?
to go whenever I want, because no rest one out for me, but I may come back if I have an update.
That's what I mean. So there could be, he could appear on the balcony or
well, yeah. I mean, he could walk out.
Yes.
He could walk out. We don't know what he knows, what he doesn't know. My understanding is that he wouldn't be told if there was an extradition request for him.
Intriguing times.
But I would imagine that he's probably got some thinking to do before he steps out.
Great work, mate. Thank you. I watch this space is all we can say. Watch this door. It's 10:56, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. More on that Julian Assange story if and when it emerges. Getting back to British politics now, and okay, this is our third hour of discussing Theresa May's manifesto. The first 2 hours yesterday took place before we knew for sure what was in it, or at least before she'd made the speech launching it, before the manifestos were handed out. The picture hasn't changed much, but this is now the end of the third hour, and I'm going to say something to you that you can then either disagree with or agree with. It seems to me at this point, the dementia tax, the meal steal, and the winter fuel payment withdrawal, it seems to me that apart from the editors of the Daily Mail and the Sun, who arguably are the only people that she really cares about, almost everybody I've spoken to, and I know that other colleagues have had this experience on LBC, they've got quite big problems with these proposals, which means either she's being brave or something else. But the Sun and the Mail love it, both of them. I mean, they're talking about how finally we have a Prime Minister we can trust is the front of the Mail, which is intriguing. Let's dig that clip out, Axel, shall we, of her speaking just before the referendum result, and we can put that through the finally we've got a Prime Minister we can trust lens. But apart from the editors of the Daily Mail and the owner of the Sun, I don't know that I've spoken to anybody yet who really likes much of this. It's coming up to 10:58. Let's go to Islington. Fran's there. Fran, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Surprised you didn't nod off. You weren't expecting to be on hold for quite that long. My apologies.
No, I made loads of notes in the time, but I'm so nervous I can't read them, so I'll just have to wing it.
Go on then. That's what I do every day.
Right.
You'll be fine.
First of all, it's relating to what you've just said about, the cost of care and the threshold of
yes.
100,000. My dad died not long ago from cancer, but he had dementia at the very end.
Oh.
He had absolutely no equity, and he didn't, there was no estate to pay for it, and he had the best care you could imagine. If that happened to my mum, who's in a part of Kent that, the house you couldn't buy a garage here, she would not have anything left. So I'm just saying that I think that ties in with the level, because if they put the wealthy threshold too high, then I think they're going to lose the Tory voters. And I have a reason for saying that. It's like, why have they set it at pension credit level?
Yes. I'm not 100% sure that's what they've done. I think that's just what everybody thinks they're going to do.
It's all proposed.
So the idea of someone on pension credit being a Conservative voter is less likely to...
No, it's a higher level.
Right, OK.
It's like the ones that live in Costa del Sol.
Does your mum need the winter allowance, the winter fuel allowance?
Absolutely. You see, she relies on it.
And she's probably going to lose it.
Well, if this was lost, she would be in trouble. Because she's one of the many, and I feel nobody's thinking about them, that are the same as just managing. They don't have lots of money. They can't go away. But they had a small work pension like she did that she pays tax on. But because it fills up that gap between the state pension and the tax credit, that's it.
She doesn't qualify. You can tell from the music that I'm up against the news. Do you want to come back afterwards, Frank? Because if you've paid me the compliment of taking notes, I shouldn't hurry you. Do you want to come back afterwards?
I can read them, yeah.
Yeah, well, you consult your notes, madam, and we shall return after these words. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Oh, dear, James, your pronunciation of Die Zeit called me physical pain. It's pronounced Die Zeit. All right, what's the other one called? Die Welt. Yeah, buy it on Sunday if you speak German. There's a big piece about me in it. 3 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to British political discussion on LBC. And a cautious suggestion just before the news that the only people I've found so far who are very pleased with Theresa May's proposals, particularly with regard to old age pensioners and to school meals, the only people who are cheering this manifesto seem to be the editor of the Daily Mail and the owner of The Sun. I could be wrong, and we'll stay with this until you've proved I am. Fran's in Islington. She's consulted her notes now. We're looking at people like...
Another bit of paper, sorry.
We're looking at people like your mum, and you're persuaded, convinced, you know, that if she loses her... I mean, to an outsider, to someone with Philip May's kind of money, it's a pitiful, it's a pittance, a tiny amount of money, but if your mum loses it, she will heat her home less.
Yeah, I mean, she's in her 80s. She's got very bad arthritis. She can't drive. She's also got breathing problems now. Yeah. And she totally relies on the bus pass and on her...
No one's taking the bus pass away.
No. I mean, it was raised... it was because it was raised in conversations over the last few days about where the cuts are going to go. And, so sorry for being... That was in my notes.
Well, actually, you're right to mention it, because quite a lot of people do conflate the two, and I know quite a few middle-class pensioners who don't think they should get a free bus pass.
That's what why I brought it in. So, for her, I think, I mean, there's a kind of a whole generation of women, especially, who are now on their own. They are in houses that maybe like as a couple. They've got to be able to heat them. They've got to be able to live there. And they often maybe only work part-time because they were otherwise expected to look after the children. So they end up with very small pensions because they weren't career women.
Yes.
Does this make sense?
No, it really does. And I'm going to tell you something, Fran. I hadn't thought of this. I'm glad you took those notes. I see why you did, because you're exploring a line of thought that I don't think I've seen in any of the professional coverage and commentary.
No, because it's been polarised. Yes. It's either been just on the benefit or rich. But nobody's thinking about the same equivalent of just about managing, because they fall through the net.
Yes.
And like I say, I'm using her generation because I know other people like that.
Do you think that it's a calculated risk then? That and this might, I know I sound a little bit like a stuck record sometimes, but I do think that the editorial policy of the Daily Mail has influenced the country.
Well, I don't need that.
More than anything else. No, good for you. But if I tell you that the Mail and the Sun are effectively doubling down on their support for Theresa May, and yet she's done something that would ordinarily alienate traditional members of that constituency, traditional supporters of the Conservative Party, do you think she's just confident that they're doing such a great job in taking away any alternative? None of these people are ever going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. So I take the pensioner vote so much for granted. I reckon I can pick their pockets and still rely on their vote.
Maybe it's the demographic.
Yes.
What I'm saying is the sort of people who read those papers aren't necessarily the people who will be out there on barricades fighting for this. They've got other issues that they're concerned about, ones that have been mentioned before.
Well, or until you bring... You heard the caller earlier who described himself as quite right-wing, and he would ordinarily be weighing the Conservative vote, but because they've taken away his school dinners, potentially, suddenly he's in uproar.
But the powerful donors to the parties and the people that do have the money are the ones that aren't going to be affected.
You sound like me now, because this is where I would say, well, that's why the Mail and the Sun are fine, because they're fine. You know, Murdoch's not going to be touched. They're not going to change. Exactly. They're not bringing in Leveson too. She's taken that off the table. There's not going to be any... They're not going to stop buying the papers.
Their demographic aren't going to stop buying the Mail and the Sun, etc., or the Telegraph, because this isn't going to be an issue.
And the cheerleading continues. I hope, and I mean, I hope you take this in the spirit it's intended, that I worry more about women in your mum's position who don't have a daughter like you looking out for them, Fran.
Well, I've got my own, I'm one of those just managing.
Well, juggling.
Myself,
there's a phrase for it. You're looking after the people above you generationally, keeping an eye on your mum, and you're looking after your children as well.
Yes, it's. I've got my own housing problem, shall we say?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
mean that I can't do as much support for her, and I'm sure people will phone up or say, "Well, why doesn't she look after her?" I would if I could.
And that is the bottom line. And in fact, I'm not sure I'd be invited callers of such callousness onto the, or ignorant callousness. Callousness is a necessary evil, I suppose, in some circumstances, but when it's built on complete falsehoods, it doesn't really have much of a place on this programme. And speaking of complete falsehoods, here's what Farage said when he was asked why he'd been to visit Julian Assange. For journalistic reasons. I will not say anything more about that, but I did it for journalistic reasons, not for political reasons. This, of course, shortly after he'd been in America visiting Donald Trump. He was asked, why did you meet with Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy in London? And the German journalist writes, Farage stops for a moment to think. Following his visit to the Ecuadorian embassy not long ago, he told reporters directly after his meeting with Assange that he could no longer remember what he had done in the embassy. So Zeit Online asked what he'd been doing, and now he remembers. He says, oh, for journalistic reasons. What, because you want to write a story about the WikiLeaks founder? They asked, I thought quite reasonably. For journalistic reasons. I will not say anything more about that, but I did it for journalistic reasons, not for political reasons. And then Zeit Online asked, what do you mean when you say journalistic reasons? And he waffled a bit, and his press spokesman interrupted the interview. Deja vu, anyone? Barry's in Norwood. Barry, what would you like to say?
So my mouth has just dropped at that whole Nigel Farage thing. Wow.
Don't get cross, get informed, mate. It's all out there. Zeit Online, they've even put out the English translation.
Do you know what? There's an FBI special guy coming in to investigate people. I think people better watch themselves. That's all I've got to say on that one. But you took my thunder in that last call, James, with the about the pensions.
Go on.
I would like to add some lightning. Right now, pension credit is. Right, I was just watching an interview with John McDonnell.
Yeah.
And I work in housing benefits, right? And I see it on a daily basis. I'm always having to ask people, old people especially, please go and claim. Please go and claim. They will not claim benefits because it's a benefit, and it's, you know, there's already you're deterred from claiming benefits because it's a negative, isn't it?
It's seen as failure, or they see themselves as scroungers, and this narrative, again, I keep coming back to the Daily Mail, but the Skyver versus Striver thing has taken hold on such a level that generation think that claiming anything that they're entitled to is beneath them. There's a line, Stephen Bush at the New Statesman put it out today, there's a line from a bloke in Stockport, a retired engineer, saying, I worked for 50 years and I've never claimed anything in my life, but they better not take my winter fuel allowance away. And there in a nutshell is the problem, because
he doesn't realise.
Exactly.
He doesn't realise. Do you know what? I see those people who don't claim attendance allowance. They cannot move. They cannot move. They're stuck in a chair. I've been around to visit a guy who's stuck in a chair. He's got his neighbour passes in every now and again, but no, he's not claiming attendance allowance. He's not getting support from the state. He will not go and claim. And if I didn't go out there, and I make it my business too, most people don't want to do it, you know,
sure,
in local authorities, whatever. I make it my business too. I see that you're living below your means. You need support. You need that help. I will go out and give it.
They've been so successfully indoctrinated into the idea that any forms of benefit claiming puts you on the same team as what are the cliches they use? The one-legged Somalian lesbian with an enormous mansion in Knightsbridge and 27 children. They've done it. They've pulled it off.
I have those conversations with them. They've got the same newspapers sitting on their table, right, telling them to hate everybody else. And meanwhile, they're telling me how much, you know, everyone else has got. And they haven't got anything. I'm saying, mate, you just need to go and claim it. Yeah. All it is that they've taken away the support that used to be there. Because when pension credit came out, there were teams of people going out insuring older people claimed. But now you have at least £2.8 billion of underclaimed pension credit.
Is that right? People are entitled
to. That's per Age UK. Yeah. There are over 750,000 pensioners over 75, who are not claiming.
So I mean, I can probably answer this question myself, but I want to hear it from you. What do you think this policy is designed to do? Well, what do you think of this policy, just taking away the winter fuel allowance? How is it going to affect the people that you spend time with every day?
Well, the thing is, Jim, this is why I say you stole my thunder, because I looked at it yesterday. When I saw it, when I saw the pronouncement, I thought, well, you're taking people for granted, aren't you? You're thinking, well, I've got your vote in the bag.
Do you?
I don't need to care about you anymore. Yeah, they don't. They really do. This is what it seems to me.
So where's the lurch to the left coming from that some people have been warning about?
There's no lurch. It's absolute nonsense. I just saw a couple of reports about, you know, what they're saying in the papers and the paper previews, and I thought, what? absolute baloney. What left? What blue Labour? What are you talking about? And it's like they're selling a narrative specifically to achieve an objective. They are swinging I mean, if Ofcom rules apply to them,
to the newspapers,
it would be great. The newspapers. It would be great because they could stop lying to people. But they're directly lying to people, saying, "I'll do this, like it's good for you." Look, their welfare reform that they're supposed to have been bringing in 7 years ago, it still hasn't happened. They still haven't brought in universal credit yet. People are suffering. So to go and try and bring in a further welfare reform and apparently means test this thing, it just means more.
It seems an odd thing to have risen to the top of the list, because we accept the necessity of savings or raising more money. We accept that necessity. What are we going to look at? Winter fuel allowance for old age pensioners. It is seems like quite a callous thing to reach for first, doesn't it?
Not only that, James. Not only that, but it's also this dementia tax. I mean, do you know, we'll be as heartless as possible, and not only dementia tax, but then they're going to go for the school kids.
Well, you put it like that. It's not. You put it like that. It's quite persuasive, isn't it?
We did.
So where's the silver lining then? Where's the silver lining?
I'm hoping that there's a change. I'm not going to say where I would vote, but I would hope that people would just look at what the details of the manifestos are and say, well, really, does that suit me going forward? Is that what I need in my life? Do I need to sell my house?
But then maybe they're doubling down on their confidence that the alternatives are so unattractive to the electorate. Whether they should be or not is a conversation for a different day. And the newspaper have certainly played a part in portraying the alternatives as profoundly unattractive. They think they can do this, and the size of the potential victory will sort of provide a retrospective validation of things that people who vote for them might end up being hurt by. But then we're back to Brexit. Happy days, Barry. You got anything nice lined up for the weekend, mate?
I'm starting back on work on Monday, so it's going to be a nice, relaxing one.
Keep your feet up.
Excellent.
It's 11:15. Well, there you go. Right, listen, it's up to you whether or not things continue in this direction, but at the moment we're finding a lot more evidence for the accusation that Theresa May is taking the Conservative Party back to the nasty party label than we are for the criticism in some quarters that she has lurched to the left. I say criticism, many people would welcome a lurch to the left. I sense the lurch to the left line comes from the words that she delivered in her speech. Promising a fairer society, a country where everyone of whatever background has the chance to go as far as their talent and their hard work will take them. We must reject the ideological templates provided by the socialist left and the libertarian right, and instead embrace the mainstream view that recognises the good that government can do. So the words possibly speak of a desire to see more equality, more mobility. The policies, I think we could probably fairly describe the top three policies as a dementia tax, picking the pockets of pensioners, and taking food out of the mouths of school children. You just could, if you wanted to. You might not want to. The brilliant Ian Dunt, who, as you know, I'm something of a fanboy of, he spotted another distinction yesterday on this curious redrawing or recalibration, if you will, of the political pictures, and I can't off the top of my head remember exactly how he put it. I'll find it for you imminently and share it with you. It was about bits that she's doing that seem to be moving further. Here you go. Taking the Tory and Labour manifesto together. Ian Dunt wrote, the author of that Brexit book, who we spoke to last month. It feels like we're seeing an economic shift to the left, together with a cultural shift to the right. Which is a very astute observation, although when we look at the top three topics of Conservative manifesto policy, that economic shift to the left is hard to discern. I think he's referring more to the idea that we will have a little bit more intervention in business, which is a kind of Michael Heseltine approach to business. It's not necessarily anti-conservative, but it's anti-Thatcherite. Gail's in Clapham. Gail, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Glad to be listening to what the other people are saying. I'm coming through because I'm a pensioner that does get heating allowance every year, and I don't need it. No. Now, I know I should just pass it on to a charity. You know, you don't, or you forget, or
of course.
Well, they've sent it to me anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. So you spend it on gin, do you?
Well, if I can.
Yeah, we're quite right too.
All on the nose of the lucky boy in the 230, really, but not. I really think we should come at it from the other angle, be a bit clever, because it shouldn't be about taking it away. If somebody needs it, they should have it. But it's about, I think it should be opting out, and I think a lot of people would do that if it was easy. And I've got a sort of an idea, because if you think anyway, to set a means test is a can of worms. Where are you going to put it, you know?
So you'd make it easier for people to opt out?
Yes, and I've got a way of doing that. Plus, of course, you know, it's just very expensive for the government to do this. So each year, you wouldn't know this, so you haven't got there yet.
Go on.
You get a letter from them that says your money will be coming to you in a few weeks. Now, all they need to do, in my mind, is to put a thing there which says, if you want to opt out of this, just send this form back, and we will give it, like, why don't you put it to the NHS? In that way, nobody has to claim and feel bad about it. The people that need it will say, well, I do need it, I'm not going to reply. The people like me who don't need it will very, very readily say, of course I don't.
I like it. I like it. I don't know that the logistics are as simple as
well, I think they are.
Well, I remember hearing similar suggestions at the time. I think Gloria Hunniford, of all people, led some sort of campaign for pensioners to give it back, and it was harder than it sounded. And also, you can't really allocate it to the NHS because the NHS operates on knowing what its budgets are. So if it's made...
Don't do that then.
And then you know what the Daily Mail would be doing? It'd be whispering in people's ears that if you send it back, Gail, they're going to give it all to foreigners.
No, don't send it back. Don't send it back. Just don't get it. This is the thing. Gloria Hunniford, etc., would say, take that money... And
I think it was her. I don't want to misrepresent her. I just plucked the name out of the ether.
I've heard of it somewhere before, or give it to charity. But if you just say, we won't send it to you if you don't want it, then it makes it so easy. And I'll say, no, I don't, thank you very much. And they'll go, fine. I won't send it to you. Now, what they do with it afterwards...
Yeah, but this is where the Daily Mail comes in, isn't it? And they say, well, if you don't claim that money, they'll give it to a poll.
Well...
I don't want you to immerse yourself in the comment section of that newspaper's website, but I promise you I don't go close to exaggerating. That is the story that would get out there, and you'd get it shared on all the Facebook pages.
Well, wouldn't it be worth sharing the site? Because I think people... are very reasonable, and they'd just say...
I do too, but I'm losing faith.
Dear.
I'm losing faith, Gail. Donald Trump is President of America, and you're live on the radio saying people are very reasonable. What?
I hope to get this one past you.
I'll put it on the... I'll put it on the back burner. Making it easier for people not to take the money. It would be a lot less problematic, and it would look a lot less potentially nasty than just deciding to take it away from lots and lots of people. But I don't know that you'd make a big enough economic impact by doing that, and that is clearly, whether they admit it or not, that's the real thinking behind this, is saving money. If they then do somehow effect tax cuts for the highest earners or reduce corporation tax, then you will find it pretty hard to resist the argument that money that's been saved by taking food from the plates of school children and money from the pockets of pensioners has gone into making corporation tax and high-earning tax cuts. But I don't know. Or do I? It's 26 after 11. Jessica is in Sutton. Jessica, what would you like to say?
Hiya. I just wanted to say I'm a community nurse. I work in Sutton in Surrey, which is like a fairly, especially the little pocket I work in, like a fairly nice bit.
Yes.
And every day I see at least sort of 3 or 4 clients who are living in sort of 3, 4-bedroom detached homes, but living in a single room downstairs, can't afford to heat the home, can't afford to eat what they like to eat. They're sort of surviving on the bare minimum. And I think absolutely they should sell their houses and go and live in sort of with 24-hour care where they've got sort of company, stimulation and comfort.
There's a sort of, yes, no, there's nothing in this manifesto that addresses that sort of problem, except, of course, the proposal that if they were to need 24-hour care, if they were to get dementia, then the house would be sold and the money raised, either posthumously or not, the money raised from the house sale would go on their social care. I think, and it pains me to suggest that it might have been less callous than it first appeared, but wasn't this part of the thinking behind the bedroom tax? I know these people own their homes, but a lot of older people with more bedrooms than they needed would move into smaller properties, and then families who were living in properties that weren't big enough for them would move into the bigger properties that had been vacated. It didn't work because there was a massive shortage of small properties for people to move into. But you see, just it's weird to see someone suffering and knowing that they could raise £600,000 by selling their house.
Exactly that. And the sad truth is that generally they do have families who might pop in maybe once or twice a month and come and see them, and they're sort of very keen for. This is obviously not everyone, but just from my experience.
I know where you're going, and I know what you're about to say, and I applaud you for saying it, and I've got your back, Jessica.
Yeah, no, it's true. Very keen for their family to stay at home with the bare minimum care, and thinking that their visit is
because they're going to win the lottery on the day of the funeral.
Exactly.
I don't know. I understand why you're reluctant to say that out loud. I don't know anyone personally that falls into that category, but you have to search for reasons why somebody would be suffering in the ways that Jessica and the other fella as well who works in the Housing Benefit Department described. And you can't help but conclude this obsession with passing money on doesn't necessarily come from the people doing the passing. It comes from the people doing the getting. Just off the top of your head, Jessica, scale of 1 to 10, how nasty, just specifically on the winter fuel, if this phrase that Theresa May coined herself when describing how some people saw the Conservative Party back when she was chairman, the nasty party, how nasty does the removal of winter fuel allowance look to you?
Oh, 10 out of 10.
Really?
Horrendous. Yeah, genuinely. For some of the...
It can't be 10 out of 10 because it currently goes to millionaires, so you can only have 9 or 8 at the most.
Well, yeah, okay, all right. But I'm talking about obviously I can only talk from the groups I see, the groups of clients I see in my sort of neck of the woods.
Yeah, I hear you, and I do, actually, in my more unguarded moments, I genuinely do believe that some of these people who make these shady donations and operate in the shadows of our society and somehow have managed to introduce the word elite into our political vocabulary, these bagmen of billionaires and these secretive tycoons who think, or the newspaper editor with a grouse moor who thinks that we're the elites. It's a brilliant, brilliant contract that they've pulled off. But I genuinely do believe, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, it's my conviction that they do sometimes look at the world and think, why the hell, even if you've got £1 billion in the bank, why the hell are my taxes paying for some peasant to heat their sitting room? Why the hell are my taxes paying for some chav child to have a hot meal? Why the hell are my taxes going on dementia care for people who can't afford to take out Bupa full-time residential provision? I genuinely think they exist. I don't know how many of them there are, but that's not the problem. It doesn't matter how many puppet masters there are. It matters how many puppets that they've got hold of. It's 11:30. We continue to pick over the bones of that Conservative manifesto. As things stand, I think the next caller is going to slightly redress the balance, but as things stand, apart from the editor of The Sun, the editor of the Daily Mail and the owner of The Sun, not a lot of love for the idea that children should have their lunches taken away, old people should have their winter fuel allowance taken away, and if you were unlucky enough to get dementia, you should have your house taken away, albeit posthumously, which is nice. The other big breaking story of the day is the news that the Swedish prosecutors have announced that the rape investigation into Julian Assange, holed up, of course, for 5 years in the Ecuadorian embassy here in London, is to be discontinued. Richard Suchet is all over it. What's the latest, Richard?
Yeah, well, we were talking, weren't we, a few minutes ago about whether or not Julian Assange was, in fact, safe to come out of the Ecuadorian embassy now. I think we are getting to the bottom of it, and the answer is no, because he is still wanted for a much less serious offence of breaching his bail. But in the last few minutes, we've actually been hearing from Sweden's Director of Public Prosecutions, who's been explaining the reasoning behind dropping the rape investigation, the consequence of which is to revoke the European arrest warrant. Got a clip to play you now. There is a lot of legalese. I've tried to edit out some of it. You're not going to hear the voice of Marianne Nye because she was speaking in Swedish. Sure. You're going to hear the voice of a translator. And I'm going to translate it for you in advance in about one sentence. They couldn't continue because he didn't turn up.
Consideration of the fact that all possibilities to advance the investigation have now been exhausted, it appears to be no longer proportional to maintain the decision for remanding Julian Assange to custody in absentia and to maintain the European arrest warrant. In consideration of this and of the fact that legal proceedings would require Julian Assange's personal presence in a Swedish court, there is therefore no longer any reason to continue the preliminary investigation. If Julian Assange were to return to Sweden before the statute of limitations for the crime elapses in August of 2020, The preliminary investigation could, however, be reopened.
Curiouser and curiouser, said Alice.
So, you know, not cleared of allegations. It's the investigation just isn't going to continue at the moment. But if he steps foot in Sweden, which I'm going to guess
he's probably not going to do,
probably not going to go on holiday there anytime soon.
But if he sits tight until 2020, he's home and dry. Apart from that bail.
Yes.
Breach. So, do you think? I mean, can I ask you this, or is it unprofessional? You just don't really want to answer. Do you think he's going to come out today? Seems unlikely.
I think it seems unlikely because, as we were saying before, it is. He does not know whether the United States have put in an extradition request to the United Kingdom. Of course.
So he would be frightened of
I
being
think so.
swept up and stuck on a plane to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be Guantanamo Bay.
No, he probably would claim he was there, though. But he, you know, even if there is no extradition request currently, as soon as he's in police custody in London, what's to stop the United States then putting in an extradition request, especially as they have emphasised in the last month that his arrest is now the top priority of the United States.
Yes.
So you're asking me my opinion to guess. I would say it's unlikely he'll come out today, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him on the balcony.
Have we heard anything from him on Twitter or anything like that yet?
Yes, there's a lovely photo of him looking very relaxed and smiling and saying it's a great victory for him and for WikiLeaks. But as I keep saying, I'm not sure this is over.
No, and I think it merits repetition. Has he used the phrase "great victory"?
Yeah. Was it him? Was it?
Or was that
somebody
from the
speaking on his
WikiLeaks
behalf?
account?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's on the WikiLeaks.
But as we learned from that director of public prosecutions in Sweden, the investigation has been discontinued because they can't investigate if he refuses to be questioned.
It's not that it is a great victory because he's been cleared. It's a great victory because he didn't turn up for long enough.
For ages.
And therefore... And the other thing to say is that the Met Police have emphasised in their press release that they will provide a level of resourcing which is proportionate to the offence of breaching bail. And that is clearly a reference. You may remember that the Met Police were conducting 24-hour surveillance outside the Ecuadorian embassy for nearly 4 years.
Yes.
It cost £11.1 million. I think they are just trying to make clear that that will not be happening again, even though he is still wanted.
Might be scaling down somewhat. Richard Sush, I'm not going to say it because I think I might see you again this before 1 o'clock. Who knows? That's one of these developing stories. 11:39 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We're going great guns on the Tory manifesto, the three legs of this stool: the dementia tax, the the meal steal, and the pensioner pickpocket. Slightly tabloidy language. You're more than welcome to phrase them in rather more positive terms. We were going to talk about smartphones and children after 12. Still might. It's just that the switchboard is buckling under the strain of people who want to talk about this. But we can return. Let's get on with it. Martin's in Farnborough. Martin, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm a Conservative voter. I have 2 children in state school who have benefited from the free meals. My dad is elderly, higher rate taxpayer, and he benefits from the winter fuel allowance. And the stark reality is we don't need it. We shouldn't be getting it. It's just wrong. We need a system which supports the most vulnerable, the most needy. I liked your previous caller who said we should have an option to opt out. I've got an even easier solution. The solution is you just do it in your tax return. I do a tax return. It took quite a while to stop the child benefit when that system changed for people who were higher rate taxpayers.
And the onus lay with the taxpayer, didn't it, rather than the revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just had to pay it back because I was receiving it in error, and I had to pay it.
A little bit more complicated potentially than you described, but arguably less complicated than whatever system they eventually come up with. Did you hear the winter fuel allowance will park for the time being, but on the school dinners, I'm in the same position as you in terms of our children's education and indeed the absurdity of me being given it for free. But did you hear the teacher in Birmingham who rang in about an hour ago?
No, I missed that.
If I tell you what he said, you tell me whether it moves your needle at all. He is a primary school teacher, frontline. I've heard from quite a lot of other teachers who completely endorsed what he said. He said, the best thing about this free meal, free lunch, is that it has improved the educational attainments in schools. The graphs show that it has improved behaviour. The schools are happier, healthier places. And if you go back to giving it only to the kids who can prove that they're poor, you cannot avoid the stigmatisation and the bullying and the problems that go hand in hand with that.
And I don't dispute that at all. I'm a strong believer in a good diet helps children learn and exercise, etc. So you continue to give it to everybody, but you again do it in the tax return. So instead of me contributing back my child benefit I've received in error, I contribute to the school dinners through my tax return.
That's not going to work.
Well, why not? It worked for child benefit.
It's a big enough thing to fill in or already, and the child benefit was a one-off. This could change every year.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know,
I mean, for me, I think our politics are different, and yet we've got some common ground here. For me, the price we pay to make sure that kids who need it get it is kids who don't need it, like our kids, also getting it. And when I put that also on the table alongside the stigmatisation of Jimmy Free dinners, who gets bullied about it for the rest of his life, I kind of recognise why there are some decent cases for doing it, but they're not decent enough for me to risk it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, and I agree, because the stigmatisation of children who are receiving it is a sad indictment of how small kids behave, isn't it?
Right, and adults.
Yeah, and adults too. But certainly we need, you know, as the population, we need to look about what we take and what we give.
I couldn't agree more. I just don't think I would ordinarily, and you perhaps as a conservative, self-described conservative, as you feel differently, if I was looking at where we can make savings or where we can raise more money, I wouldn't have put old age pensioners, school children, primary school children, and elderly people with dementia at the top of the list, Martin. And deep down, I don't think you would either.
No, I mean, it wouldn't be my first port of call.
But it seems to be Theresa May's.
Certainly, she's in an interesting position. she can make decisions which perhaps, you know, some of them need to be made, and historically wouldn't have been made because, you know, pensioners, well-off pensioners are Conservative voters historically.
And then she stands accused of perhaps taking them for granted, which is sort of the accusation she's probably going to find it hardest to avoid. But sensible points made by Martin, and whether or not that tax return, as the earlier caller, Gail, I think, also had the plan of the lady in Clapham on how these things could be better done. The problem is that the British government institutions and bureaucracy don't necessarily have the best of marriages historically, but that doesn't mean they couldn't in the future. Tess is in Honiton in Devon, near the River Otter, Tess.
Yes, I am. Not too far away from
Fantastic.
it, James. I'm not a teacher, but I did work in school and in education for quite some time, in the front line, if you like, in the school office, dealing with parents.
Yes, very crucial role, that, actually. It's underrated, undervalued.
I would definitely agree with you on that one. I agree with everything that teacher said, the guy about an hour ago, about the benefits of everybody being on free school meals. The problem I see from another side was the administrative procedures of it all.
Yes.
What happened prior to universal free school meals, parents that were entitled for their children to have free school meals because they were on benefits, and we would receive notification of that and then mark it accordingly that this child got free school meals. Any child whose parents are on benefits, the school gets a pupil premium. They get extra money because their family is on benefits. When the universal free school meal plan came in, parents stopped notifying our very large primary school that I worked in then of their need to have free school meal. So what happened?
It's about 1,300 quid a year, isn't it? And so you would that's the reception to year 6, I think. So that the school was losing money as a result.
Losing money.
Oh well,
left, right, and centre.
Well, blow me down with a feather.
Parents stopped claiming if they were on benefits, for their free school meals. And they may also not just have children in reception 1 and 2, reception to years 1 and 2.
Oh, you're brilliant. I wasn't sure where you were going with this. So the pupil premium has suffered as a result of the universal school meal provision.
We would spend hours and days and, You know, you'd have parents who've got children in lower years, but also in year 6, and they'd stop supplying.
Well, there's a light bulb moment. So, of course, and it makes perfect sense, because if it was me and I was a little bit, dare I say, feckless, because, you know, or just a little bit busy, actually, we don't have to be rude about it. I've got to tell you, otherwise my kid doesn't get free dinners. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to get off my backside and do it. I'm going to make the call. I'm going to send you the paperwork. I'm going to prove it. My kid's getting free dinners anyway. I couldn't give a hoot about it. I don't even know about the pupil premium.
No, but it also came in, like I say, that you'd have parents who've had children in lower years, but they'd also have a child in year 5 or 6.
Yes.
And you'd lose out with that child as well, because they just didn't bother applying for...
Is there any way round that? Is there any way round that?
No, we spent so much time sending out letters saying you must come in.
Are you on benefits? Are you on benefits? Are you eligible? Are you eligible? Come in.
You're eligible. And with all due respect to some parents, trying to explain that difference was quite difficult, really. That they didn't see that they still needed to apply for, in brackets,
because the
you know,
school benefited, but the kid still got the meal, so they didn't understand what it was they were supposed to be applying for. Unless you could give them 10% commission on the pupil premium to take home and spend on themselves, it's hard to know how you'd incentivise people to simply help the school.
Well, at least 3 times a year, school does school census.
Yes.
And part of the school census is showing how many pupils you have on pupil premium, and that is where you get your funding from. So in the weeks up to pupil premium, it's massive, absolutely massive. You know, and I have to disagree slightly with the teacher who, you know, saying the stigmatism. I do understand there is a stigma to free school meals, but a huge majority of schools now, including the one I worked at, have computer systems that deal with it all. It's all calculated.
Yeah, but you know what he said, and I'm going to let you go 50-50 on this, so I'm not, you're not cancelling each other out. I'm not siding with either of you. His argument was that, and I see this a bit because my kids are of the relevant age, is that one of them tells their friend that they're on free school meals, and then they fall out, and the ex-friend uses it as a stick to beat them with. I think there will always be some stigma, but maybe not as much as some of us fear, Tess.
You go in and you mark on your automated system any child that's free school meals. The child doesn't know it's there. The teacher who does the register knows it's there. And then when you print out your meal lists for who's having what, there's a little mark next door to it. The children never see these lists. They go to the canteen, and the canteen knows exactly who's entitled to free school meals in each class. I hear you. It doesn't cancel out what John in Birmingham said, but it moderates it. Good grief, how did it get to that time? What are you doing, Tess, taking up half the show? There's people waiting for the travel news. It's 11:49. Let's crack on with these examinations of the manifesto policies. Of course, the scariest one is the immigration pledge. So to reduce immigration, Michael Fallon refusing to explain last night how much money the economy will lose, on the grounds that the people who are cheerleading the Conservative government at the moment don't want the public or the readers or anyone to know that reducing immigration on a significant scale will take a massive bite out of the economy. The whole raison d'etre of the right-wing press in the last few years has been to use immigration as the explanation for why people are getting poorer and to leave rich people off the hook completely. Just think about it. Working-age taxpayers coming into a country that is increasingly old. Life expectancy in this country goes up by 5 hours every day, I think I read. So that can't be right, can it? But working-age taxpayers, no, we don't want any of them. It's no wonder they're not. I don't know why I bother. Martin's in Malvern, lovely part of the world. What would you like to say, Martin?
Yes, and a glorious day it is today too. Thank you for taking my call, James.
You're very welcome.
Yes, I was wishing to talk about the winter fuel allowance because this has been something I've been sort of banging on about in discussion groups for some time.
Yes.
It is quite ridiculous. And in researching the thing, I found that in fact our pensioners abroad. I know you made a little sort of aside about they've got to pay for their air conditioning in Cyprus. But there are many countries that British pensioners overseas can apply for their winter fuel allowance, which is quite crazy.
If they live in... I think there's a temperature threshold. If the average temperature of a country passes over a certain level, I don't know that they... I may have got that completely wrong, but...
Yes, yeah, I think you're right on that. But even so, if you've actually left the country to retire abroad...
Somewhere warmer, probably.
Yeah. I mean, the whole...
It still gets cold in winter. On the great sort of scheme of things, during the Brexit debate, we were often reminded that a lot of the people that, because they're British living overseas, we call them expats rather than immigrants, apparently. But they weren't massively wealthy. They were quite often, sort of not living hand to mouth, because obviously they've decided to retire overseas, but they were more likely to be old and if not struggling, then certainly not necessarily flourishing. And if that is the case, then, you know, that 100 or 200 quid a year might be relevant to them in a way that you and I don't currently believe it is.
Yes, but why should we be giving it to people who've chosen to live in a different country? You know, I mean, it all started off really as the Christmas bonus, didn't it? It was a £10 Christmas bonus, and then different political parties of different persuasions gradually increased it.
The problem is, once we decide who we're going to take it off, where do you derive your confidence that you won't be next?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm 69. I'm quite happy for them to take it off me.
Okay, so someone of your age who wouldn't be happy. Once it's not universal. Do you see what I mean?
Well, within the pension system, the government know the people who are on minimum pension, and they can apply for a guaranteed minimum top-up, can't they, to bring it up to 150 a week?
Yes.
So therefore, within the pension system, they will know the people who are only...
Well, if that's what they do, that's 10 million people losing it in the stroke of a pen.
Mm-hmm.
And you're cool with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All I'm saying is people who are receiving the guaranteed minimum pension should still continue to receive.
That's 2 million out of 12 million pensioners.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be on side for taking it away from 10 million pensioners, regardless of where they live.
A lot of the people that I know just spend it on Christmas presents for their grandchildren.
I'm going to go out on a limb, Martin, and say there are probably more people in the country that you don't know.
Well, that may be true. That probably is true.
And how are you planning to vote, if you don't mind me asking?
Floating.
It's coming up to 11:59. It really is a beautiful part of the world, Morven. I have to tell you something, though, Martin. There's a cake shop in Morven that shuts at 4 o'clock. And I went there at 1 minute past 4 thinking that they'd sell me a cake over the counter, and they absolutely refused. Is this normal behaviour in Morven?
Well, they do say it's the only cemetery in Britain with a bus stop.
It's coming up to 11:59. I also had a terrible experience on a sponsored cross-country run on the Malvern Hills once, but I shall spare you that story. Martin, many thanks indeed. Should we crack on? Should we move on to something else? I think we've circled this a lot now. We've covered a lot of ground. A broadish consensus. But it's nice to hear Martin at the end.